is an issue of pure criminality that is almost at a genocidal level. You can't equate killing a cow with slaughtering hundreds of human beings. The way it is going on in Benue, for now, is beyond farmer-herder clashes. And these guys are well-armed commando units coming to wipe out communities.
Well, on that...
And that picture tells the story of how the common people in Benue State, the victims of this massacre, this genocide, how they feel about it. The woman has complete lack of hope. Well, first of all, let me use this opportunity to condole once again with the government and people of Benue State and with all the families affected, and families and friends, and indeed with all Nigerians, because what has been going on in Benue, Plateau, and so on in some other places, is actually a collective assault. It's an assault on our collective psyche as Nigerians and as human beings even. So talking about that, the president went there, which is good, and I think he could have gone there much earlier, but anyway, he went there. But I don't think that we had a very the decisions and declarations that were made may not have been as forceful as some would have wanted. For example, the way some of us look at this what has been going on, it's not an issue of reconciliation. It's an issue of pure criminality that is almost at a genocidal level. So it's when people talk about settle it, there could be minor elements of that, but you can't equate killing a cow with slaughtering hundreds of human beings. I think that's the point the Tortive kept making. There's one picture that is very poignant. I don't know if you have seen it. The picture of the lady who was in the hospital with her child, whose arm had been severed, and who looked away, in protest about the actions of government. It's good that officials of the government went. I mean, the security chiefs were there. I spoke with the governor myself, and I know that a lot of security people were there, and things are happening. But are they far-reaching enough, Charles?
And are they after the fact?
They are clearly after the fact. Look, I mean, we're not talking of preventing. I mean, we are not talking of 200. Next time you will hear will be 300.
Right. So your sense is that the frequency of these attacks is up without a commensurate response by the government.
Yeah, I think the government is actually without a solution as it is now. And I'm not talking of this government alone. The Nigerian state appears unprepared for the sort of violence that people are unleashing on fellow Nigerians. And you just said the Chief of Defense Staff tell you that he thinks that there are foreign elements coming in. And these are not just criminals like that. These are mercenaries. These are actually commando units of foreign armies trained elsewhere and so on, well-equipped, well-armed, well-prepared tactically. Sometimes even more so than our. And our system is completely unprepared for that.
But you do know that politicians are sometimes blamed for creating the environment for these types of things to take place.
I don't think what is going on, the systematic killings and displacement of people, indigenous people, that has been going on in Benue, in Plateau, parts of southern Kaduna, and so on and so on, where the Chief of Defense Staff comes from, in southern Kaduna, which I think is a bit in southern Kaduna. But the way it is going on in Benue, for now, is beyond farmer-herder clashes. And so, these guys are well-armed commando units coming to wipe out communities.
Well, on that in that regard, I mean, I wonder how much empathy you have for the Nigerian army, which is clearly overstretched, and with the solutions that are being proffered by the Chief of Defense Staff. He was saying that he was sitting where you were just a minute ago. He says foreign fighter infiltration is due largely to the fact that Nigeria doesn't have proper borders.
I think that is a very valid point.
What I'm wondering is that if that is something you agree with, would you vote for such a measure if it came to the National Assembly?
No. I will support. This is the Chief of Defense Staff making an opinion. That's a very considered. This is the topmost, the number one soldier in the country. And looking at it, if you look at everybody knows that our borders are porous, and we are surrounded by francophone brothers all over, and with the crisis in the Sahel, as he rightly said, and also even the confusion in the former ECOWAS and so on, we are actually at the receiving end of a lot of things that have an international dimension. Look at the situation in the Lake Chad region, the effect of climate change, and so on and so forth, where the Lake Chad is drying up, or sources they are fast depleting sources of water, and even of lush pasture.
Right.
So everybody is coming down.
Right.
And then the crisis and the state failures that we're seeing around the Sahel makes Nigeria a very attractive place for mercenaries to come to. So I agree completely with the Chief of Defense Staff. Our borders, we need to rethink the state of security of our borders. And if there is suggested that we secure our borders by fencing or by whatever way, I think that we should support it. I will support it.
You made a very important point, which is that it doesn't matter what else you're doing, you have to be alive.
You have to be alive.
You've got to kind of, secure your borders. But, you talked about the woman with the child in the hospital.
Yeah, that's the picture.
That's the shot.
That's the picture.
That's a very powerful image, isn't it?
And that picture tells the story of how the common people in Benue State, the victims of this massacre, this genocide, how they feel about it. The woman has complete lack of hope, lack of trust, lack of confidence, and that picture typifies defiance. And standing before her, you can see the official, she doesn't care.
It also shows incredible frustration.
Of course.
That you have basically let me down.
Yes, they have a right to feel so.
Yeah.
And you see, it's a combination of a lot of factors. The CDS talked about fencing of the borders. We've got to look at them. How we will secure our borders. And our security and defense chiefs are there to work out the details. We hope that Mr. President will give accelerated attention to that, and then he will look for the money. And if a proposal like that finds its way to the National Assembly, as a member of the Senate Committee on Defense, as a member of the Senate Committee on National Security and Intelligence, I will waste no time in supporting it and canvassing support for it, as we have always done. But it's beyond fencing. The president has got to, as leader of the country, convene urgent meetings with the governors. I've kept talking about this need for ranching as a national security policy, and also as a food security strategy as well for the country. He established the Ministry of Livestock, which, by the way, should have been livestock and aquaculture, because you can't deal with livestock and then leave out.
And of course, aquaculture
fisheries.
Involves your people, doesn't it?
Of course.
The Niger Delta.
Of course. So it should have been that. Anyway, but where is the strategy? The CDS has said that instructions were given for ranching in Benue. It's going to be a national problem. As we are talking, there are clashes sometimes going on in even down as far as Enugu.
No, but you know that the issue has been controversial. So I can understand the point they're making.
Yes.
Let them start in one place and show how this can work and work efficiently, and then kind of expand from there.
No, I don't think properly explained and properly developed as a national security and food security strategy, that there's no governor that will oppose it. We implemented ranching in Bayelsa when I was governor, at the height of these farmer header clashes. And we directed the headers to go to a particular place owned by the state. In fact, my successor
made that a law. That worked.
Well, of course, because they're supposed to be there. But you see, when I was there, because of the recession we're managing, we didn't have the resources to build the fences, to build all the facilities that we wanted to build, so that everybody who came in with a cattle will be there and pay tax. And the herders were happy because they used to it. They used to pay taxes called jangali in the north. They are willing to do so. So it's not enough to do it only in Benue. What of cows that are straying into Bayelsa, to Rivers, to Enugu, and to all other parts of the state? We should have a national policy banning open grazing, but doing so in such a manner that we will engage the herders and then build these ranches for them. Then we stop it. Well, you have to provide the ranches,
right?
Otherwise,
isn't that a law that the National Assembly can make?
Well, unless you couch it as a national security issue, the National Assembly, our power to legislate, may not cover ranching as such,
right?
Because agriculture may not be in the exclusive.
So would it be more of an executive order?
And that's why the president, as leader of the country, has to engage the state governors,
right,
who by our laws have the land, by the Land Use Act, and they will know how to provide the land. And then the CBN, in my view, and the Ministry of Finance can be made to provide money, if it is 3 billion, 5 billion, 10 billion, whatever the cost comes to, and make it available so that you have these ranches built all over. And with time, the private sector will buy in. And sometimes even local government councils can build in a place like Benue that is very good for grazing. That can be a veritable business if you build 4, 5, 6 ranches with the support, with the consent of the people, the government, and the people. So that anybody who wants to do any business of livestock, you take your cattle there. They are registered. You are protected. You build a school there. For this, because you see, as I said on the floor of the Senate one day, when this issue came up, I said, look, those cattle herders who are taking cattle from Niger Republic, from Chad, up to Sokoto, Kebbi, Zamfara, and then taking them to Bayelsa and Rivers and Lagos, actually, they are victims of the Nigerian state as well. Young children who don't go to school, no access to formal education, whether English or Islamic or Arabic. And all this education is valuable education. So if you build these ranches, you build the schools there for them. You build the schools for them. And you create a way by which cattle is transported. How can cattle be competing with us, even in FCT, for space? There are times we move around. I'm not talking of Benue now. I'm talking, Charles, of the Federal Capital Territory here in Abuja. And I don't know how the Minister of the FCT is dealing with that. Because that's a major problem.
Well, he's a member of your party. Why don't you ask? Or you're not quite sure which party he belongs to?
Because that has to be dealt with. What I mean is, even in the FCT, we're not spared. So we can't be competing for space with cattle.
Yeah.
And however valuable they are, there can be no moral equivalency between killing a cow and then somebody now coming to revenge to wipe out a community.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's no equivalency.
But
that is genocide and should be dealt with and called by its name.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We mentioned the fact of the political parties. So let's kind of segue into the other topic.
So let me round up with the security suggestion.
Yeah, briefly, because we're running out of time. Before you say to me that I've taken up all, I didn't give you enough.
So the CDS talked about fencing of our borders.
Right.
I think that's an issue. The president should convene a meeting with his governors and the security people and work out a template and create the finances for implementation of national compulsory grazing, compulsory ranching, okay? And therefore, thereafter, a ban will follow, okay? Then, our local systems are weak. Principally, the local government administration system in the country. It has collapsed. It doesn't exist, okay? The president, through his attorney general, approached the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court made a pronouncement. They have to follow it through, so that we can have governance at that lower level, where most of these things are going on. And then fourthly, there has to be more presence and governance, real governance, by state government officials, by local government officials, in terms of dealing with communities and knowing what is going on, and relating and managing security with the DPOs and the security officers in the various local government areas, and so on and so forth. And then funding and training of the police.
Right.
The CDS talked about that. No nation can be secure unless you've trained and fund the police.
Absolutely. That's key.
That is key.
The question is not, it's not, the theory is a completely different thing. The issue, which I think is what you're emphasizing, is that action has to be taken.
Action has to be taken.
And it's got to be taken now.
Yeah, and
not,
we all need
tomorrow.
to work together.
Yeah.
We don't need to politicize it. We don't need to make it a partisan thing.
Absolutely.
I wish it was what the APC did all these years. When Boko Haram started, they made it a PDP thing, a President Jonathan thing.
Right.
You know?
Well,
played politics with insecurity, with
right.
economy and so on.